So this is Baruch Fleischman here at the Tikkun Elevator Kolo, and you know that I'm still working on Rabbi Yosef Chaim Mimran's book, The Ultimate Connection with God. Yesterday he said something I thought was really fantastic, peeling away layers of who we are. He said that ultimately in the deepest possible place of us is one thing, and it's called will. It was a very interesting idea and something really has to be thought about. I haven't really read that carefully. I learned personally with Rabbi Mimran, but then his book came out towards like the end of the time I was learning with him. So all the different parts of this book, I've heard different pieces of them. But that little idea yesterday is something that you have to think about. That there is a driving force in people's lives. It can be polluted in a lot of different ways, and Rabbi Mimran is trying to clear that out. So now we're coming over here in another section, and we're going to get, I guess, more specific about the struggle. This section 3 is called Your Opponent. Part 1 is the Yetzer Hara, and he says the Yetzer Hara and the ego seems like they go together. So let's hear some of the language of Rabbi Mimran. So he says, if someone identifies totally with thought, this means that his entire sense of self is based on the content and activity of his mind. As such, this person would believe that if he were to stop thinking, he would cease to exist, since his entire existence is based exclusively on his thoughts. The aspect of self that believes this is known as the ego. The ego consists of mind activity, and the only way it maintains its place in one's life is through constant thinking. Let me read this again. The ego consists of mind activity, and the only way it maintains its place in one's life is through constant thinking. It is built upon a mental image that is formed through a person's conditioning, both personal and cultural, as he progresses through life. So in other words, there are variations in the way that people think based on background and environment. Then he goes on and he says like this, the term ego has been defined in a number of different ways. In this book, we are using it to refer to a false self, one that is created through a person's unconscious identification with his mind. We must realize, however, that it is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, that lies at the root of this ego. And the Yetzer Hara itself energizes it. And there is a vital reason for this. The Borei Olam, Hashem Yisbarach, implanted the Yetzer Hara deliberately within every one of us to ensure that we would always have complete free will. The ego's interest is in self-preservation. Now, that's very important because, as a Rabbi Mimran has said to me sometimes, you're on the defensive. Self-preservation. It does not acknowledge the existence of the neshama. As far as the ego is concerned, only the physical, material self matters. Moreover, it is always trying desperately to keep the past alive, for without it, it feels like, who am I? It is constantly projecting itself into the future, for it believes that that is the way to ensure its continual survival. Staying focused on the future also gives it a sort of release from any frustration it may be experiencing currently. A future focus will give it some vision of fulfillment to look forward to. One day it says, after I get through this stage, or when this or that happens, I'm going to be okay, happy, at peace. In this mode of thinking, the present becomes merely a means to an end that will likely never shift from its comfortable home in the future back into the present. For it lives in a fantasy future, A fantasy future that the mind is projecting. All these things, these psychological things about how we handle ourselves and how our minds work. So I was a graduate student in psychology. You read a few people who had some good ideas, but nothing better than this. This is Baruch Fleischman, your lift manager at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and also recommending very highly the purchase of this book and the practice of these things. Now, it seems to me, just in my final words, is that those people like Rabbi Mimran had tremendous ideas and pushed them out. But there has to be a receptacle for them of people who want to learn Jewish meditation, want to understand what it's like to connect with infinity. People who need that. People who have to do this. So this is Baruch Fleischman once again. Thank you very much for learning with me. Kol Tov.